it's one of those things where nobody pays attention until it's too late.
That we're opening a door to complete pandemonium.
An August BC Supreme Court decision grants Aboriginal title over 7.5 kilometers of land to the Cowichan Tribes. The First Nations have appealed because their original claim was for a larger parcel. Much of the riverfront land is held by the city of Richmond and the federal government, but it does also include neighborhoods filled with private homes and businesses.
We are arguing to defend those private property rights of those homeowners and for certainty to ensure that businesses can make the decisions to invest that they need to make.
We have called on the Premier as well as the federal government to put a reference question as soon as possible to the Supreme Court of Canada asking a simple question. Does private property rights extinguish Indigenous title on the same piece of property?
No one from Cowichan Tribes was available for comment.
Land was stripped from people. Land was stripped from people 150 or more years ago. What is the solution? To strip it from the people who have it now? I personally don't think so. You have this, for instance, you got a similar conflict in the Middle East. It's just a lot more bloody, right? You don't want to go there.
Welcome to Supply and Demand with Adam Nadler. This is a podcast dedicated to the real estate market in Canada, available now on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Welcome, Steve Karrasch. Tell me what's a brief introduction maybe of yourself and what's going on from your perspective in the Canadian real estate market.
A brief introduction to myself, sure. Overweight, starting to bald, middle-aged realtor. That's me and dad. Real estate agent in Surrey, in the Fraser Valley, basically the suburbs of Vancouver since 2008. Perfect time to get licensed. I thankfully run a good team. Have for many years, actually bought a business. Not that anybody comes into real estate that way these days, but I did. And big YouTube channel, thankfully, that sends me a whole bunch of business because people hopefully trust what I'm saying. And then also the podcast channel with Tom Story. And that's growing even faster now than the YouTube channel. So that's me.
Yeah, you guys have a good beat on what's going on. I oftentimes try to tune in and listen to what you're saying, and been on the show myself. And I remember having a blast because we are definitely very like-minded in what we're seeing going on, and also our approach to kind of what the outlook is and how people should kind of anchor their expectations in the real estate market right now. So the one thing that I really like when I talk to people like yourself is getting an idea of what's happening in your market always is kind of a foreshadowing of what happens in Toronto. Even when it comes to legislation, normally you guys get it first. You guys are the guinea pigs. You let shit hit the fan in your market over new things, and then we get it kind of later down the road afterwards. So what's going on in BC?
Oh man, from so many angles. There's, of course, the market, which is not probably that dissimilar to the Toronto market at the moment. And then, of course, we've got legislative stuff, which, like you mentioned, thankfully it's calmed down in the last 6 months, but the previous 18 months to that, there was a new rule being put in place between our regulator and the province. Every minute and a half, it felt like every Thursday, there was an announcement of something else we need to do. And then now we've even got the courts that are doing massive things about the native land claims, Indigenous land claims, whatever we're supposed to call them now. And that whole thing is just starting to blow up now. Now that the ruling's been made, people are starting to catch on with what's going on. So honestly,
well, walk me through that. What's going on with the Indigenous land claims? That seems to be something that no one really hears talking about. And if it's happening there, I think it's probably going to end up here.
Yeah, totally. So it's basically I'll give you the synopsis since 1890, I want to say, the Cowichan tribe apparently was promised a particular bit of land that was, in all intents and purposes, their summer home. They came over to fish from the island up the river a little bit, and that's where their village was. Well, that was apparently at some point stripped away from them, and they've been fighting for it ever since. So at this point in time, after I think it was like 500 days of actual in trial court, a single judge, one lady, ruled that they do have rights over this particular piece of land. The only problem with that is now that particular piece of land is a massive port owned by large commercial companies like FedEx. It has on it now a portion of the some sort of like a pipeline or something for fuel that gets to YVR to fuel all the jets. And it also has private property on it. And so basically what the judge ruled was, you know how we have fee simple and that's granted to us by the Crown?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have ruled that Indigenous rights or Indigenous land claims, or what they call now Indigenous title, sits above the Crown.
What?
Yeah. So the Indigenous land claim there is, I mean, it's owned by the Indigenous people ahead of even the government of Canada. So that, as you can see, is causing massive issues because you're basically turning what is fee simple property into leasehold. Now, there's all sorts of problems with this. You have people that are exaggerating things on both sides. For instance, I heard one of the there's so many layers to this, and it may bore your listeners, but it's just so in depth and so crucial.
I don't think anyone's going to be bored by this because you're essentially saying there's the erosion of private property rights happening in Western Canada.
Completely. Well, the first thing that happened as soon as this deal was struck, the Tawasin First Nation and I believe the Musqueam, who are also in that area, went, "You just gave that land to them. That's our land. Like that was your summer home. That was our all year home." Right? So this is a first problem that happens. So now we have different Indigenous bands fighting over the same piece of land. And then you have things like, well, if I have a mortgage on that land, I can't renew my mortgage. There was something that came out just the other day where one of the landowners there has contacted his bank and said, "What the hell do I do here?" And they're like, "You're on your own. We're not renewing your mortgage."
Why?
So, because leasehold land is a lot different. So actually, I can speak a little bit to this because I was very young. I don't really know. But my grandfather at one point did own property on I believe it's the Musqueam First Nation, South Vancouver. And they had a 99-year lease. Well, I think it was every 33 years they were allowed to renegotiate the lease. And one of those 33-year periods, the band just took the land back. And so there's a lot of uncertainty if you're on leasehold land because you're only renting, like it's literally a lease. It might be a 100-year lease, but it's a lease. And then it's a lease to, the band, of which might have different political leaders or want to do different things with the land, or who knows, right? So basically that takes it from being some of the most expensive real estate in Vancouver to being basically worthless because nobody will lend on it. You don't actually own it. So it really uproots the fee simple property ownership. Now, there's also another level to this, which is treaties were filed, I believe, in almost every province except British Columbia. British Columbia was the one province where none of the land was actually handed over by the Indigenous groups originally through some sort of a treaty. So their argument is, well, we never actually gave you any right to this land, where they don't have that necessarily in other provinces. I think there's 5 to 7 main treaties across the country, of which the Indigenous actually signed off on those. BC doesn't have that. So the reality is now it's such a big deal. Nobody knows what to make of it. Of course it's being appealed. And then getting back to, there's so many different angles of this. Now there's somebody that came out of, I believe he was a Squamish First Nation counselor at one point. He did a big interview on CBC and just basically said, well, we're not going after the property owner. What we are going after is the government of Canada to compensate us for the land in perpetuity. So in other words, we don't want to really uproot anything. We want paid out. or continually paid out. So these are all the different kind of levels, right? Now, that guy has nothing to do with the case, as far as I know. It's just interpretations of the case. So land was stripped from people. Land was stripped from people 150 or more years ago. And what is the solution? To strip it from the people who have it now? I personally don't think so. You have this, for instance, you got a similar conflict in the Middle East. It's just a lot more bloody, right? You don't want to go there. So we've got this almost unfixable problem. And it's just on the cutting edge. And really what everybody's worried about now is the rest of the province is unceded territory because they never signed those treaties.
Right. So everybody's worried about a new precedent being set.
The entire province. So they said, and again, this Squamish First Nation guy, he's like, well, it only involves the lands of which there are claims. Okay. The entire city of Vancouver is claimed. The entire city in a similar lawsuit. Right. So I don't know if it's actually a lawsuit, but it's got a claim against it. So where's this going to end up? We don't know, honestly. There will be some solution, but there is a very real situation where everybody that owns property in British Columbia could forfeit that to the First Nation of whichever First Nation. That's the other problem you have. I don't know how many First Nations.
Well,
So
isn't that the issue that, you know, to make a claim over a certain piece of land is not so straightforward because it's not like those tribes for hundreds or thousands of years weren't warring with each other. It's not like those, boundaries and, lines weren't being redrawn constantly over those years.
Well, that's also an interesting part of the whole debate is you are now literally breaking it down into each of these little, I don't understand it. I've talked to some people about it, some First Nations people about it to try and understand it. But if you, for instance, had 200 years ago a tribe of 150 or 500 or 2,000 people, now you've got all of those people spread out. So now you have to do individual deals with every little group. Right? It's not like one First Nation that we have to deal with and understand what's going on. Everybody has different cultures, traditions, ways they want to deal with stuff, even within my understanding. Speaking with chief of the First Nations, one of them was even within any political situation, in the council there's infighting. In the council there's corruption, right? So it's just honestly, I don't want to feel, my thought is you can't screw with fee simple. It will break down our society as we know it here. But at the same time, it's an unfixable problem.
So it brings into question a whole bunch of things. Number one, private property rights being the cornerstone of Western civilization. I mean, via John Locke and, all of our great, Western philosophers that actually helped to bring us to where we are now. But in terms of fee simple ownership, which most people don't even know what that is, being granted to us from the Canadian government, it also gives the government the ability to expropriate land if necessary. Correct. So, for example, if there was something that needed to happen for some infrastructure that was beyond a shadow of a doubt absolutely necessary for some kind of emergency, I mean, who knows what, that the government would be forced to pay fair market value and expropriate land. And if the First Nations now have a claim that sits above the Canadian government, are we now saying that even our own federal government doesn't have the authority, should there be some greater societal need to do something with that land? I mean, isn't that what collective government organization is for? Are we now kind of seeing the breakdown of even the left side of that?
Yeah, and it's at that point in time, under the same argument, if the Indigenous band with claim over that particular land decides that whatever the use is they want is more important, then do they have the right to expropriate from the Canadian government? right? So it's like, and that's actually the thing they're doing. So what they're saying is we're going after the city of Richmond owned lands because the city of Richmond. We're going after the province owned lands and we're going after the federal government owned lands. Those are the ones that we're really concerned about. Now, I don't think they want to reconstruct a fishing village there, right?
No,
Like, I don't
of
think
course
that's
not.
I
Yeah.
think what they want is to or what maybe it's involved to. I really don't know. I haven't talked to any of them. I haven't read the case. I'm just reading all the news articles coming out of what's going on and listening to homeowners in that area. But they found a way to now extract money, and they're going to do so. Whether it's rightfully theirs or not, their argument is, well, it's our land in the first place, that sort of thing, right? So it's really turning. It's one of those things similar, and we'll get into this next, maybe, is like the Burnaby multiplex thing that we've done here, which we can get into. It's one of those things where nobody pays attention until it's too late.
Mm.
And everybody's going, well, what's the big deal? And it's like, you don't understand how, like, you're worried about the kitchen that you have and the school zone your kids are going to go into, and you're not worried about the foundation of the ownership of the property that you own. And until it's too late. And now it sounds like the reason a lot of the homeowners in that area are upset is that it was kind of kept under wraps while the trial was going on. Nobody really knew about it until after the verdict. So, and I will say, one judge, one decision.
Right. And so now we've kind of, at least in BC, opened Pandora's box.
Yes.
And that's not, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, I hope you can. Maybe you can. But it sounds like you guys have kind of opened up the Pandora's box to a whole bunch of other litany of issues that could arise from this ruling. And so, in terms of the actual private property for just individual residents in that area, you mentioned one person not being able to renew their mortgage. Is there a practical circumstance here where we see residential homes in those areas not only unable to sell from a legal perspective, but also unable to basically forced into default on their loans?
Maybe. I saw one article at one point early on in the process that actually said the First Nation, Cowichan First Nation, is not going to press those people out. But when they go to sell, guess who the buyer is?
So there's
And
only
if you
allowed to be one buyer, then
may,
essentially.
we don't know. It's too fresh, right? But I
Right.
did hear that argument being made, like, yeah, go ahead and use it as long as you like. Except when you're done with it, guess who's getting it, right? So I've heard that argument too. So I mean, a lot of it's speculation. A lot of it we don't really know what's going on. It's going to be very eventful, but it's one of those things where you're like, this just changes the entire landscape of everything real estate that our society has ran on for 125 years or more. So as a result of that, the shift could be massive, of which I don't think many people are prepared for.
All right. Well, that's a kind of a nice way to segue into what's happening in the broader market because barring any kind of flipping of the board that we that's apparently might be actually underway with your real estate market out there, I'm guessing that you guys are seeing kind of the same thing where in Toronto, Greater Toronto area, and in Vancouver, Greater Vancouver area, where condos are basically have completely fallen apart. That market is very, very much dropping like a stone, and
Mhm.
freehold is still kind of holding its ground a bit. Is that the vibe?
No, no, that's not really our. So when I think of my market is much more like the outskirts of Toronto and wouldn't be like the downtown Toronto market, right? So I'm outside. I will say, generally speaking, Vancouver itself didn't have the big run up as much. And in areas like West Vancouver, the rich suburbs of Vancouver, during the pandemic, they actually saw prices go down because those houses were already $4, $5, $6 million. Nobody was going to those, right? They were going an hour and a half outside of town to Chilliwack, and what was a $700,000 property went up to 1.3 in a year. So as you can imagine, those are now 9, right? So we've seen a massive shift in the detached market in the suburb areas. I will also say that the condo market's very divided. Presale market dead, right? There's nobody building. Well, there's nobody starting new buildings. There's lots of finishing old buildings. So the presale market is completely dead. The condo market is not that bad. The investor condo market is terrible, of which is probably the best time to buy, but that's maybe another discussion. The point is, if you have a livable unit, and I'm sure this is what Toronto's going through too, if you have a livable unit of which somebody can actually live a decent life, they're still very much in demand. They may have come down, but they're still moving. Most of my units that we sell are condos. A lot of townhouses, condos. We don't sell a lot of detached properties here. Just mostly for cost, because I don't have anybody that can afford a, $1.2 million teardown, right? To get into a nice house, you're $1.4, $1.5 million in the suburbs. So that being said, yeah, we're probably, if I had to put my thumb on it, we're probably down 20% in both categories. We're probably could be down even further than that.
In what time frame?
Since peak, but we've done a really weird thing. One phenomenon that I noticed since the peak of the market really is, how like the inventory chart just every single year just does that big, like, looks like just M's everywhere, right? It's just arch.
Seasonal trends, yeah.
We've started to see that seasonal pricing over the last 3 years. And I've never saw that before in my career. So it was like June was the best time to sell because it was the highest prices. And that's happened 3 years in a row. So we did see the big 22, obviously the run up. The prices are now higher than the end of 22 in everywhere. But that was so slow. Nobody was purchasing or doing anything. If I saw somebody actually buy in December of 22, I'm like, wow, the phone call usually goes something like, I don't know, man, it's going to be tough. And then I look at the numbers. I'm like, oh, you actually made a really good buy. And then prices 23 went back up and then back down and back up and back down. But it is so city dependent. I was just doing an evaluation for somebody yesterday in the city of Port Moody, which is a small little kind of like harbor village, bay village, I guess, kind of thing. And I was looking, they bought September 22. And currently the detached home price in that market is higher. And the market is falling. So it's actually recovered quite well at one point. So it is trending down. I feel like we've known that house prices are trending down, but the numbers have shown otherwise. However, we are in a marketplace now where in the north end of town, for where I am in Surrey, the detached home market has been at 12 to 15 months of supply all year.
Wow.
Yeah. So as a result of that, you're going to have downward pressure. And we're seeing that. I did a video on my channel just the other day of a property that sold in 2022 for 1.55. Now, if you saw this place, you'd be like, who was paying that? Right? And it just sold again for $410,000 less than that in June this year. In foreclosure, by the way. And you're still looking at it going, who's paying that for that? But now it's 1.15 instead of 1.55. Right? So
Yeah.
there has been a substantial drop. It was also that home pre-pandemic, 850. So like there's still that lift there, right? Like it's not as bad for most people, but the people that are phoning me now are almost all 2021, 2022 buyers.
Hmm.
And that's kind of a little bit of a frightening trend, I feel.
Yeah, it certainly seems like there's the cool off from the COVID phase has definitely really settled in, and we don't have any kind of sellers, I should say, rather having expectations of anything that resembles COVID, which is,
Mhm.
in a way it's nice, right? Because there's less of that pie in the sky thinking. However, I still hear people talking about interest rates coming down, and I found it interesting because most people don't actually look into what the Bank of Canada is actually saying when they do these things. They just see, oh, number went down, right? And
Mhm.
and then they
Mhm.
make their assumptions from that. And one interesting thing that I like to do is if you go on the Bank of Canada's website, every single monetary report that they publish when they do an interest rate cut or interest rate announcement, they give this nice big PDF and it's like 100 pages long and it's like enormous and it's all gobbledygook. If you just take it, download it, upload it into your favorite AI, and basically say, give it to me straight in a few bullet points, no nonsense, no Keynesian political spin on it that makes me feel good about things not being good. Give it to me straight. What's happening? Um, what you'll see is that the AI will say to you, oof, that's not looking good. So basically, although they just did an interest rate drop on the overnight rate, they've now very much signaled that their hands are tied. Don't expect any more drops coming. That we're in a fiscal dominant, environment where
Mm.
unless the government really dials back on spending, even if they did cut rates, it wouldn't really do anything anyways. And
Yeah,
so because of that, they're
I'm really worried about that they've lost their mandate of inflation because they're not what they're doing now is not fixing their mandate of inflation at all. Inflation's going up and they're cutting rates. So there's an
yes.
argument that inflation should be 2% above, or sorry, interest rates should be 2% above inflation. And now we're at the same number. Like,
Hmm.
that's not good. So
Yes.
is it going to come back? Probably. The funniest thing, and I'm like, am I the only person that sees this? We have our media absolutely crapping on everything going on down south. You've got um, the administration that's trying to get Jerome Powell to drop interest rates and heavily pressuring him to do so in order to pass the big, beautiful bill, whatever it is, and make it cheaper, right? And here in Canada, we've got a government led by the guy that used to be the boss of the guy in charge of the Bank of Canada now. Like Tiff Macklem was Carney's deputy, right? Like, and he's lowering interest rates. I'm sure there's no phone calls being made there. I'm sure they forgot they worked together for 10 or 15 years just in order to get the borrowing rate down in order to pass the biggest budget deficit, sorry, by 5 times probably.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I
Like
wanted to
this
talk
is
to you
the
about that.
we have they have the big beautiful bill down there. We've got the big beautiful budget. And both countries are doing the exact same thing, and we're supposed to praise ours, and we're supposed to say that guy down there's an idiot.
I was just
Personally,
talking
I
to
think they're all
somebody.
idiots, but
Well, of course, they're definitely all idiots and all malicious in some sense because, they're definitely not looking out for what's best in a factual economic sense. So I was talking to somebody about this yesterday and somebody brought it up, kind of pointing at our budget deficit and then making a very snide remark about, Trump. And I was like, look, man, if you really look at what's happening from our perspective as Canadians, for Mark Carney, I mean, Trump's the best thing that ever happened to him, man. He has taken zero
Mhm.
accountability for anything and always has the perfect scapegoat. He always is able to just point down south and say, well, it's all his fault. Don't look at me. And this has been a very typical, common political trope and trend that we're seeing from all of our politicians, regardless if they're provincial leader or the prime minister. And I think that when we do see this budget finally come to light on November 4th, the chances that we get a no confidence vote is enormous. I think that we're going to be flung into election, a very quick election at the end of this year, and that it's going to be very decisive because we've seen what this amazing negotiator has done, so called. He's done nothing, right? In fact, he every time he goes anywhere, he comes back empty-handed. And even the last time he went to the States, nobody even showed up for him at the airport. No one even, no diplomat from the US even showed up at Dulles to like say, hey, welcome to the US. It's just been an embarrassment. So tell me, what are your thoughts on what we are going to see play out on the real estate end of things once this budget does come to light and we see a crazy scary number?
Oh, I don't even know how it's going to relate to. How will it relate to real estate?
Can
Well,
I
they
give you
promise a
my
bunch of yeah, I want to know yours for sure, but I'm just trying to think like I haven't really thought about that aside from they're trying to spend a whole bunch to build a bunch of communist housing, which I mean the 13 the let's make a new agency to build government housing is the worst idea possible. Like we had on our uh podcast a landlord advocate, right? They were trying to work out all these different ways of benefiting tenants versus benefiting landlords. And really what I gathered from it all is, if you just didn't collect the tax, you wouldn't need to give any of the subsidies, right? Like you could just collect less tax and then not spend it. And then we wouldn't have the 50% chewed up by the amount of employees that we need in order to collect the tax and give half of it out. Right. So I think that's our biggest trouble. They say they're going to get a hold of that. Good luck. Right. That's the thing they're going to do by splitting the budget into operating and investing. I wish I
Oh,
could do
well,
that.
yeah,
All of my
it's
debt is my investments, just so you know, and then everything else in my life is a positive cash flow situation. So yeah.
right. Yeah, that's
What
how
do you
they're going to
think?
get that's how they're going to get rid of the spillage, my ass. So yeah, I I've been really keeping a close eye on how the bond market's reacting to all of this, and it's very much already signaling, I think, and what we can expect is, you know, we see a massive budget deficit hit November 4th and bond yields surge, right? Because bond investors are going to immediately start to lose faith in the Canadian bond market as a result, which is going to force yields up higher, and we're going to see fixed rates come up. And I don't think it's going to be a small move over the next 12 months. I think fixed rates are actually going to move up quite a bit in the next 12 months due to this budget, unless we see a quick flippening of the government into a conservative government, which is going to be hopefully more fiscally responsible, and start to actually, realistically doge out a bit and start making some cuts, which is probably what we need from an economic perspective. So no one's going to like hearing that. Canadians don't understand what the implications of these deficits mean, and I am preparing for a YouTube video, which I was going to do on exactly what you mentioned when you said the housing initiatives from the government. And I think that people just have such a short memory that they forget that this whole idea of the government building housing for us
Yeah.
is, number one, not new. And also, it's not something where it's like not new and we talked about it many, many years ago. No, 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 no. This was the very last administration, and people forget how much money was promised and what was promised. And let me give you the quick numbers here so that you have a quick idea of what we're talking about here and what we can expect to see. Is in 2017, Trudeau came out and said, we need housing. Market's on fire. People can't find anywhere to live. We need to build some housing. So we're putting forward a housing plan to build 100,000 units over 10 years. So by 2027, we're going to have built 100,000 units. Okay. And it's going to cost around $40 billion. Okay. Now, we're in 2025, almost in 2026. How many out of the 100,000 do you think are constructed? And how many do you think are under construction that will be actually ready for 2027? Well, I'll let you have your guess and then I'll tell you what the numbers are.
I'm gonna round it to 0.
Yeah. So everybody that I've asked has said zero. There actually hasn't been a single person who guessed anything other than zero, which gives you an idea of what the
Yeah.
people really think of our government's, efficiency. And the real number is this: they have built so far 5,000 units. They have another about 7,000 under construction that may or may not be ready by 2027. If we're being generous here with the government, let's say they get around 12,000, okay, ready by their plan. They'll have hit 12% of their target. And these are all, keep in mind, not in city centers. This is like area, they built housing in areas where like no one wants to live. These are all 1, 2, and 3 bedroom low income rental housing units. And it will have been at a whopping roughly 3 million a pop for construction per unit.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
and yeah, it's nutty. And it took 10 years. If we were to build a mid-rise in the private sector, it would take half that time and it would be a fraction of that cost. Never mind, even if you include all the crazy development charges that the cities are charging, even with that, it would still be way, way cheaper. So, and more efficient. So this is kind of where we're at when the government starts promising us things. We have to look at their track record. We have to see that they suck and that they can't get it done in the same way that the private sector ever will. And they just need to get out of the way and just like cut that red tape. I don't think Canadians are ready for that yet, but in
They
terms
aren't.
of
So let me go back though to what I was saying about the city of Burnaby. They're not ready for it. So our what was he? Minister of Housing provincially was Ravi Kalin. He's out of that position now, but he was there for a good amount of time and he did more than anybody did. Um, I don't agree with him politically at all, but he did a lot. So he was doing stuff, and I was like, okay, this is cool. So they announced the multiplex in across the entire province, meaning anything 3,000 square feet and less lot size is immediately a threeplex, and the city can't say no. And anything 3,000 square feet and above is immediately a fourplex, and within 800 meters or something of a rapid transit, it's a sixplex immediately. And they gave the cities 6 months to get on board. Then you had cities that fought it, and you had the city of Burnaby. City of Burnaby says, absolutely, we want housing. All the red tape gets cut. Now, the cost didn't, but the red tape gets cut, and we're going to let you build these things, and we're going to let you build to the maximum of what the government says, what the provincial government says. We're going for it. City of Vancouver, I think, actually went higher density than that. But fast forward a year and a half, and some of these places are getting built. And you got little old wartime bungalow with a 4-story fourplex beside them now on a 5,000 square foot lot. And the neighbors are like, what? Like everybody's been sleeping, right? Same with like the land title thing that we were talking about earlier. So everybody's been sleeping until they come along and get that monster built next to them. Now, the city of Burnaby was allowing 4-story garden homes. The city of Burnaby was allowing they went housing, like setbacks are like a meter from each end of the property lot. Like they went whatever we need to do. And then they actually started getting construction. And then the neighbors realized what's happening. And the city of Burnaby last week pulled it all back. Not all back. They've reduced it substantially. So it says to me that Canada is not ready for it. We want this housing. Your grandmother, my grandmother, whoever, they want housing for their grandkids. Just don't want it next door to them. So it's very interesting that we'll vote, like here we vote NDP, NDP, NDP until they actually do NDP socialist things like housing, and then we go, nah, hold off on that. So it's very interesting. Some of these things were starting to actually pan out. Like, if I can build that many units on there and I can actually make this work, this is great. I had a multiplex deal fall apart twice as a result of it because it's now we don't know what you're allowed to build. So we aren't ready for it. We aren't ready for what needs to be done in order to become big, mature, actual country. Um, and I think that's going to continue to hold us back.
Hmm. I wish I could say that I disagreed, but I really don't. I do think that we are in for a bit of a rocky ride here. And for all the people who are listening to this and watching on YouTube and are hoping for affordable housing, um, I think that there is a strong message to be sent for, be careful what you wish for when you're asking the government for it. If you want to ask the private sector wants to be able to be competitive. I have builders who, I do business with, I talk to. They want to be able to lower their prices so that they can sell more homes so that they can continue doing business and, build more. That's how they make money. And their ability to do so is rendering them kind of useless, right? Like the DCs, the development charges in Toronto, for example, on a new home make up somewhere between 40 and 50% of the cost to a consumer of the new unit. That is not something that builders like. They're not looking to increase costs to the point where they can't sell any homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we just need to understand who it is that we're asking to do what and what their ability is to do so and what their track record is for doing so. So I agree with you. I do think that we need to be able to look at this realistically and go like,
You
hey
could have
man,
one simple actual thing with still collecting that money. There's one thing I think that could be done that would actually make developers work better and cities still get their development. And that is, guess what? We're going to charge you the development fee when we grant you occupancy and the mortgages can be funded and the developer can get it off. Like, don't make me carry the cost for 15 years on the development fee in order to get this high rise built. Like, that's incredible, but they need to pay the development fee to get the permit to start building. Right. So now we got to roll in this 27, I think it's in the city of Surrey, 27% of the cost of a new unit is development fees. So now I have to finance that 27% of my project over for a high rise 7 years or over for a low rise 3 years. Right. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. But city doesn't care. City wants their money now because they're addicted to it too, just like the federal government. Right.
do you think that we're going to see, and I've long hypothesized that there's just going to have to be more and more wiggle room on the lender side of things given by, you know, OFC or whoever it is that would regulate mortgages?
I think we've learned the problem I have now with the developer, particularly in this type of situation, is the pre-sale model. They're going, well, we need pre-sales back in order to build. The model is broken. We need to change the business model. Not how do we get back to squeezing people again? Not how do we squeeze more? Like the model to build is broken. I think it's crazy to me that the developers just want to default to how we just screwed things up so bad over the last 20 years. Right? Like there's no reason that it should be done that way. Going forward, sorry, there's plenty of reason why it should be done that way. There's got to be a better way to finance these things. My thought is personally, I mean, I know downtown Vancouver, downtown Toronto has a different problem because they have to build all high rise in order to increase density. I think low rise 3 to 6 story wood frame in livable units with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. A one bed shouldn't be less than 500 square feet. and they should have 3 bedrooms at 13 to 1500 square feet. So people want to live in them. Those are probably more of the answer, and they need to be the outlying cities need more of that. Like basically where I am, you'll have infill builders, but there's almost no subdivisions. Everything is cutting up acreages into large stratified townhouse developments. It's probably the right solution, especially like you think of a townhouse development. I can build these four, sell them, people can move in, I can build the next four, and I can do that for 150 units if I want to. And that's probably a better solution. They get two parking, they get 3 bedrooms, they get a separate floor for the kids to go to sleep at night and we can watch TV downstairs. Like they have all of that stuff. I don't feel like, I could be wrong, maybe I just listen to the downtown Toronto people too much, but I don't feel like the cities have that same thing, or that the overall arching people that are in power view that as the same way. Then you get into urban sprawl problems, which is urban sprawl is a different thing. But I think that's likely the way things need to go. They need to find a better way to get away from these high-rise, pre-sale, investor, whatever they've been building. Like it's just, as far as I'm concerned, it's junk. I've been calling it junk forever. Micro units are the scourge of my existence.
Right. I don't think that just density without any kind of nuance is just like a flat line, period, great word, and no matter what. I agree with you on there. I think that we need to have a little bit more forethought going into these units so we don't end up with like a whole bunch of just, ghost buildings where just nobody wants to live and investors are getting crushed because they were sold to build a dream of a rental that's, a shoebox that people are going to pay them absurd amounts of money for. I guess my last two questions for you, because we've gone really into kind of like the macro side of things and then the micro of like what's going on just to touch on both those again, but in a more, I guess, direct approach, because we are in the trenches, both of us. We're seeing what's happening in the two biggest cities in the country and what's happening in real estate day in, day out. Do you think that where we will see some wiggle room, where, people can just change the measuring stick, I guess, to make the numbers work again? On the macro side, do you think that we are going to see, I mean, if you want to call it a propaganda campaign or whatever it is, the narrative change on the Bank of Canada's mandate for 2% inflation being the target, and that increases to allow
Oh, yeah,
for
they're going
greater
to
room?
3%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ages ago when we spoke to Brendan Augmundson of the BCREA, he's their economist. He says there's lots of good arguments in the economist world for inflation being at 4%.
Mm.
So it's just a theory of what works best, what doesn't. I don't know. I don't understand it enough. I understand that the cost of things. I saw on Instagram the other day, and it was going over Price is Right from like the early 80s.
Hmm.
And people were guessing on microwaves, and microwaves were like $3,500. Right? So it's like now a microwave is what, $69 at London Drugs or whatever you're going to go to at Walmart. So it's very strange to me that like we think the cost of living has gone up, because it has on things like bread. It has not on things like big screen TVs that used to, like, I remember when the first flat screens come out, I had friends that bought $10,000 flat screens. And now my kids in their playroom have a 55-inch flat screen I bought at Costco for $369. And it's beautiful. Cost of some things has gone up. Cost of other things has not. So cost of the important things has gone up. Housing, food, right? That stuff's all gone up. I think I don't know. They're always trying to do whatever they can. I think we should recognize that the Bank of Canada is probably more political, just like the CBC, than most people want. Nobody knows who. I had a client event a couple of years, 2 years ago, and we were giving away prizes or whatever, and I just had a quick trivia thing. And I was like, question number one, who's the governor of the Bank of Canada? Now,
No one
every
knew.
real estate agent is like, yep. And everybody in the room was like, what is the Bank of Canada? And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. So it's people don't care. I wish they did. If people cared, they would be outraged at everything that goes on. If people cared, they would be outraged at question and answer period and the wasting of taxpayer time and energy with that charade that goes on, whatever
Hmm.
it is, every Thursday. Um, I don't know. I don't know how it's all going to play out. I think they could change the mandate. I think they are acting under a different mandate right now. They're acting more like the states, right? They're worried about more employment than they are,
Which is not their mandate in
which
Canada,
is not their
actually.
mandate. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not their mandate. So maybe they're smart enough to realize that it is their mandate. It's just not written,
Mm.
and that's why they're doing what they're doing. I generally think Tiff Macklem's actually done a really good job. I would say outside of the fact that interest rates should have started going up in summer of 2021 as opposed to March of 2022. Outside of that one error when inflation was transitory, I think that could have saved us a whole bunch of cost run up, of which is now being sucked out, of which people are still paying debt on. Bank stocks rocking and rolling right now, by the way.
I think that's an interesting response because I think you're touching on something that I've often said, which is um, that at the macro level, it's not actually possible to know what like they can do whatever job they're going to do and try to guess, but that's all it is. And so I think you're right in saying that like will they change it? Like who knows? They're going to be guessing just like they were up to this point anyways. So
Mm,
it's not really something that we can know regardless, but I do think that no matter what, they are going to be stumbling their way through it. And so I think that the way that you put it, which is that I wish people actually gave a shit, but unfortunately no one does,
yeah.
is really kind of just like what it boils down to. I have one more for you, which is at the micro level, right? When it comes to actual consumers who are trying to buy homes, do you think to, I guess, be able to weight this better so that people can actually purchase homes, that they're just going to increase amortizations and allow for 40-year, 50-year AMs, and just allow that to happen so that we can make the numbers make sense again?
That's worse. I mean, if they really wanted to fix affordability, they go back to 25-year max and they go build a 10% down payment, right? That would actually, it's the tightening that fixes things. It's the loosening that makes things worse, right? So the loosening is just a short-term fix. Um, I think I mean, we realized that in '06 when a bunch of my friends at way too young of an age were buying houses with zero down 40-year mortgages, right? Like it was just crazy. Think about that. If those people still had that mortgage, and some do, they're now today still 20 years on their mortgage. And they've owned since '05, '06, something like that. Like that's insane. So I don't think that's the right solution to make things more affordable. I will say um, there are more buyers out there than people think. There is a lot of people looking for deals, of course, but most people are waiting for the properties to hit the price range of which they are willing to pay. Simple supply, demand, buyer, seller, market value stuff. And as an example of that, last week we had a property that was in terrible condition. And we adjusted for it in price. And everybody's like this is the same market where I told you we were 13 to 15 months supply all year long. And we currently are still at 13.9 months supply in that market. We put it on the market. adjusted for the condition of the home, we had 250 inquiries, we had 122 showings in 5 days, and we had 40 offers. So there's not no buyers out there. The buyers are there. Another one, I had a condo. I just reduced 20 grand yesterday. Within 20 minutes of the reduction coming through, 2 showings booked. No showings in the previous 7 days. Within 20 minutes of the reduction, 2 showings booked. So it's price. And trying to get that through to both the buyers and the sellers, particularly the sellers, is the challenge that we should be in, right? We should never walk into somebody's house and be like, yeah, let's put it up for $1 million. And oh, by the way, we got you 1.5. Like that is not good for anyone. It's not a healthy marketplace. The seller shouldn't really be happy with the price they get. Everybody should. I was negotiating a deal yesterday, and the buyer's like, this is like 5 day negotiation. The buyer's like, listen, this is it. And the seller's like, I don't want to take it. And then the seller actually said to me the thing they should say. Every seller should say this. We are uncomfortable at this price. I'm guessing the buyer is also uncomfortable at this price. That means this is probably the right price. Smartest thing I've ever heard from a seller. And so they've accepted the offer, right? So in the overall thing, are we going to see affordability? You mentioned affordability earlier. What is affordability? Define it first. I'll tell you if we'll get there. I don't think anybody's ever afforded it. There's lots of videos you can go on YouTube of news reporters walking around the streets of Toronto and Vancouver in 1983, and people are talking about how unaffordable housing is. It's going to be one of those things no matter what. People are always, it's our right as Canadians. We get to complain. We might go to jail for it soon if they pass certain laws in federally, but so far we still get to complain. So I'm going to exercise that right no matter what.
Well, I couldn't agree more on fighting that Bill C8. and
I
and
will say I do disagree with you on one thing. I don't know if you necessarily agree with kind of what you alluded to earlier, but if we do get a snap election, I believe, and I've predicted this since the last election, I believe the Liberals will get a majority.
no.
Yeah.
Why do you think that?
Well, the reason the Liberals won is because, let me offend. No, nobody's listening to this. It's an NDP supporter. The spineless NDP supporters walked away from their party. They didn't believe in what they believed in. They believed in the freaking crazy propaganda that the big orange angry man was going to crush Canada and take it over. So they abandoned their weak little party, led by a weak, terrible leader, and they went to Big Daddy, the white gray-haired guy in the business suit who is part of the Illuminati or whatever he is, and they're like, he'll take care of us. We don't want the guy that kind of talks mean sometimes. Like, that's not good. We don't want the guy that talks mean. The guy down south is the guy that talks mean. So we don't want a guy like that. We want nice guy. So they defaulted. So I think more Liberal voters defaulted now to the Conservative Party, but I think almost all of the NDP voters defected, and a good portion of the Bloc voters defected to the Liberal Party. So I don't think that will happen this time. I think some NDP people will go back. And I think more than anything, my parents haven't changed. They still think Poilievre is Trump, and they still think Trump is the worst thing in the world, and they still think Carney should spend because it's about time we start spending in this country, right? Like that's the boomer, the boomers with the paid off house and the pension that are worried about the economy. That's where the election's going. And I think enough people will go back to those other parties, and enough people will be sick of the Poilievre talk, whether it's right or wrong. There will be people that went to the Conservative Party that will go back to the Liberals because they don't like the way Poilievre's handled something. So I actually think we'll end up with a majority. And that's what I predicted a while back, which there is an argument that finally if we could get a majority of any party, that finally something could be done. Right now, we've been stuck in 3 terms of no majority, so nothing gets done. I actually think, like, if you look back at Trudeau's first term when he got the pipeline built, that was because he had a majority and he didn't have to pander to the weak-kneed NDP people to be like, we want all these social programs, all this other BS that nobody cares about. And he did have to do that for the last 2 terms. And right now, in order to get this budget through, they're going to have to do the same thing because the NDP hold the vote. Because the Bloc right now say they're not. So I think we'll end up, there's a very good chance if an election is called. I don't think the Conservatives want an election. I don't think the Liberals want an election. Well, I think the Liberals do want an election, but they don't want to show like they do. And I don't think anybody else really wants an election. So somebody's going to have to vote with the budget in order to avoid it. And I'm not sure they will. So we'll see.
Wow. So just so I'm understanding, you think it's a coin toss on whether we see a no confidence vote on the
I
budget?
think it's definitely a coin toss. And I think the people that say they don't want it, the Liberals do want it. And I think the Conservatives that say they want it do not want it at all right now because I don't think they're in a position to do any better than they did last election.
Wow.
Even though that would not influence how I vote. But I think that's the realities of the political landscape.
Oh man, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I hope you're wrong. I really do. I
Me too.
hope I
Me too.
really hope that we don't see a liberal majority because I think that's the last thing this country needs. But hey, that's just what we think. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below if you're listening. Steve, thanks so much for coming on to the show. And if you could just kind of let everybody know where to find you, and everybody, if you're listening to this, please check out his YouTube channel. He's awesome.
YouTube is the place. Karrasch Real Properties, or just search Steve Karrasch, and that should come up. And then the other thing that will come up is the Tom Story Show, of which is weekly podcast, similar to a discussion like this one. And yeah, follow me there. Please subscribe. Subscribe here too.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.